Hello, and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynn Testoni. I'm a journalist and content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we bring you all kinds of tips, tricks, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business. So what we have learned since doing this podcast is that successful freelancers have a business mindset and need to manage their finances. It sounds boring, but it's actually true, isn't it?
Actually not that boring. Like if you're with the right program, that is.
True. And the trouble with most financial software is that it's built for larger businesses, not sole trader businesses like us. So you often end up paying for lots of unnecessary features you never use, such as payroll. But our sponsor Rounded has software designed for freelancers, and it's super easy.
So easy and actually not boring. It actually becomes quite fun to reconcile.
The gamification, as you say.
Yeah, for sure. So good. Well, Rounded is really an all-in-one tool, and as part of the sponsorship, we've organised a saving of another 20% on any annual subscription. If you're a gold member of Rachel's List, that can really save you a chunk of change every year.
Absolutely. So good. Hi, Rach. How are you this week? Are you busy?
I am. Always busy. Yes.
Always busy. And this is when I am too. And this is when I wonder about how and whether I should grow the business and do this. And maybe I should take on staff or subcontract. It's a big decision. What about you? Is it something you've thought about?
Not for my own business, but yes, I definitely have a freelance team at Rachel's List. And that was a really big move because I think it does take you into a whole new realm in terms of workload and responsibility, but it also takes a lot of things off your plate. So that was just the best decision for me. I think the big learning curve, though, is learning to where you let go, and things don't have to be the way that you would do them. And so there's all of that. That shift. Yes.
It's a lot. And that's why I'm so glad to bring on Sara Howard today. She's an agency owner, and she's just about to release a book all about growing beyond a solo business. Do you want to introduce Sara?
I will. I would love to. Sara Howard is the founder of Writers Australia, a copywriting and content agency headquartered in Sydney. Over 2 decades, she's grown her business from very part-time while wrangling toddlers to a talented in-house team and an impressive roster of corporate and not-for-profit clients. And together, they've created a different kind of agency culture based on collaboration, flexibility, autonomy, and financial stability. And through Sara's work for major banks, global consultancies, and universities, she became an accidental expert in the future of work, leadership, sales strategies, and financial systems, among many other things. And she's now put all that knowledge to work in her own business and shares it in her first book, Beyond Solo, which is brilliant because we both got early copies of it and read it. And it's the guide Sara wishes that she had when she first began. So we're very excited to talk to her about it. Welcome, Sara.
Oh, thank you both so much, and thank you for having me. I feel like I've finally made it now that I'm on the content podcast.
Oh, really?
This is like
is that your
my
benchmark?
ambition. This is my bucket list item.
Oh,
I don't know about that.
Maybe we'll put that on the notes.
Well, before we get into your book, tell us a bit about your career to date and when and how you set up Writers.
Well, I started Writers in 2007, just before the global financial crisis kicked in. So that was perfect timing. And it's a copywriting agency. It's a content agency. And I don't know if you know this, but when I first started it, it was actually in partnership with a UK company called Writers Limited. I was working for them over in the UK, had to move back to Australia with my small children. And they said, why don't we set up a Sydney office? And so we were a 50-50 partnership at that time. So for me at the time, it was all about flexibility. I had, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, school run, childcare. So I was only really working 2 or 3 days a week, but I very, very quickly became very, very busy. And while the UK team was really good at giving me some mentoring and in terms of starting the business, they weren't doing any of the actual writing because culturally we were so different. And so I needed to hire some people on the ground to help me here in Sydney. And that's how the business grew. And we've got an incredible roster of clients now who have been with us for most of those 18 years in some cases. Macquarie Bank is one of our longest standing clients. We've worked with Australia Post for a long period of time. And all of those amazing relationships have really come through my network. And it's been actually one of the joys of growing a business is keeping those relationships with all those incredible people working at really senior levels in big companies around Australia.
Wow.
Mm.
Now, I've read an early copy, as we said, of the book, and I just loved it. It was so practical. What made you decide to write it?
Well, you guys did.
Oh, did we? Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
nice. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, honestly, I actually think if I hadn't attended Content Byte Summit in 2023, my life would be infinitely more boring than it is right now. And I probably wouldn't have written a book. I'm so glad I went to that event. And thank you both so much for running it. I had so many amazing conversations with all the amazing freelancers in your community. And many of them said to me, "Oh, wow, how did you grow? How did you know when it was time to grow? What did you do first? Who did you hire first?" And I thought that's interesting. And then I saw Anna Featherstone's panel on self publishing, and I thought, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. Maybe there's a book in this. And so I started to explore that. And over the next year, I spent that year talking to lots of other business founders and consultants and freelancers who've done different things with how they've grown their business around the world. And I discovered there's all these other models. You don't have to grow an agency. You could grow a collective. You can create products and memberships and VIP days. You can have a sort of hybrid model that is a little bit more flexible. And I thought, gosh, I wish I'd known that when I first started my business, 18 years ago. And so that's really how the book has come about. It's the guide that I wish I had when I first made those decisions on how I wanted to grow the business. And I wanted it to be really practical as well. I don't know about you guys, but I am super busy and I don't have time for a lot of fluff. I kind of want to get in and get some problems solved. And so I've included a lot of tools and frameworks, really lifted the hood on my business and also other people's businesses so you can put those ideas to work for you. Because one of the things that worked really well for me as I've grown the business was my job at Writers pretty much involves talking to lots of really experienced, amazing leaders about topics like business leadership or financial systems or sales strategies, all sorts of things, managing people. And so I've applied a lot of that big business logic to a very small business environment. And some of those frameworks have really changed the game for us. And one of those things is understanding culture.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, it is a great. I am actually in your book and I'm honored to be in your book. I remember the big interview that we had at the cafe around the corner from Writers. It was so great because it actually made me really look deeply at some of the choices I'd made in business and some of the things that I do, especially with Rachel's list. So I'd love to touch on, where you should start the process of growing your business. Because I really like that you did a deep dive into what growth means. You asked me that question and whether you need to grow at all. Where's the line
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I remember I had a mentor for a little while who once challenged me on that because I was like, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to accelerate here and scale this. And she said, just a moment, Sarah, like, why do you want to grow? Do you really need to grow at all? Because it seems to me you guys are doing really great work. And there's nothing wrong with saying we're actually really comfortable where we are right now. And that was such a surprise to me because I think I'd bought into this whole culture of you've got to keep growing. And you do a little bit because otherwise you're going backwards in terms of inflation and you deserve a pay rise. Even if you're a company of one, you still deserve more income each year. So there's a little bit of that. But I think it's really important to start with what growth actually enables you to do. And I loved asking everyone that question, Rachel, because it was amazing how different all the responses were. And it was very rarely about money. It was often about freedom. It was about control over what they did with their days. It was about flexibility. It was about creating something that was bigger than them with a bit of purpose or being able to build something that would outlast them. It was about creating opportunities for their team. One of the things I've discovered that is a great benefit of growing is that your clients value you differently. They see you as a more mature business, a more stable business. We always have someone available, for example, to our detriment sometimes. And but that means that they're willing to trust us with quite big budgets or big scopes of work. And so I think those two things go hand in hand. If you want those kind of opportunities, you need to create the foundation to enable it and to enable your clients to trust you with that.
And it's really interesting. I just want to quickly touch on something you said then, and also something you've said to me in the past about when you make those decisions, you have to really think through, is this a decision that I'm making now, or what is this decision going to look like in 5 years or 3 years, you know?
Yeah.
And often we don't think about that. I think when you're growing your business, that's so important, isn't it? It's critical to think, is this going to actually be a nightmare in 3 years if I make this
Mm,
decision? You know, all
mm.
those little tweaks that you can make along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing how quickly, if you grow without a foundation in place, without fixing some of the existing problems that you have in your business, it can very quickly turn into chaos and make things worse. And the outcome of that could be you lose your best clients because you stop delivering the work that they expect, or you're so busy managing people or managing the quality control of the projects that you don't have time to actually keep the business growing and going towards the goals you want. So it is really important to get those things in place. It's so hard, though, as a human being to know what 5 years will look like or 3 years will look like. Our lives keep changing, and, we don't know what's going to happen with our health or our kids or our parents. And that's okay too. I think you've got to be a little bit adaptable. But if you've got a long-term goal of what your ideal life would look like, and I'm talking about life, not work, because I really think the point of the work is to enable the life, then at least you can remind yourself of that when things don't go quite according to plan, and you can just repivot back towards that goal.
Yeah, interesting. I did love the fact that the book details all types of agencies, because I think the sort of agency you have is the conventional one where you've got in-house writers and everything, and that's possibly what we think about. Do you want to take us through a bit of an overview and the different ways you can set up and run an agency? You mentioned them a bit, but it's great
Yeah,
to
sure,
look at it.
sure. Yeah, I think one of the epiphanies I had recently was I worked on a project for a big top tier law firm. And instead of working as an agency, we actually worked as a collective of really experienced people who were at the top of their game. And I put myself in that class, which sounds a bit egotistical, but I was there to drive the strategic narrative, not to be just the writer, but actually drive the whole narrative of the campaign. And then we had a really experienced videographer, we had a really experienced designer, a really experienced project manager. And it was such a joy to work with people who were very good at what they did. We had to adapt to a lot of very urgent changes for a client that had a lot of regulatory oversight and governance around it. And so it was a hard job, but it was a great job. And the client loved that experience because they were working with the best people in their field. They weren't being passed over to the junior intern for, WIP meetings and things like that. And so it made me think, gosh, could this kind of model actually disrupt the whole traditional agency world as we know it? And it's something that I was really keen to explore when I came to research the book. So collectives is definitely one of those models. Within the Rachel's List and Content Bite community, I see a lot of hybrid models where you can really flex around a pool of contractors or outsource certain tasks. They might be VA, administrative tasks, or it might be the work itself. So that's a great flexible model. But you do actually need quite a lot of processes and structures in place to maintain the integrity of the work. There's also some genius models around products, that create evergreen income that will keep generating long after you've done the work, which is, it takes a lot of work, as Rachel knows, to set those things up, but it can be incredibly powerful because those are things that are actually quite easy to sell one day when you decide you've had enough. They're things that don't require your expertise and your time to keep executing. And you can actually create physical products. Like I spoke to Nick Parker in the UK, who created this incredible tool called the Voice Box. And we use that ourselves to run tone of voice training. And it's such a practical, simple tool that distills everything you need to know about tone of voice into a box. And clients love it, and it works really well for us as a strategic service. And because he created that product, Nick is constantly consulting to quite major brands about tone of voice. He is the tone of voice guy now.
That's interesting. Can I wind back a little bit and go back to the collective experience that you had? With a collective, is this literally where you would choose people to work on a particular project? You'd all come together and you'd all possibly invoice separately for your part in the project, or are you together in a formalized way, in an ongoing formalized way? How does that work?
Well, there are two different types of collectives, exactly as you've just said, Rachel, and I talked to people who've done each of those. So my experience was a very loose collective around one project, and one day we'd like to work again around another project in a similar way. Yet it takes one person to drive the business development to make that happen, and that's often one of the downsides of that kind of collective because we're all too busy with other stuff. In both cases, you need one point of contact with the client who invoices. So someone has to take the financial responsibility for that, or the client will lose their mind and they won't get it across the line with procurement. So you do need to make one person responsible for that invoicing thing. And maybe that person is also the primary communication channel for project management. And that depends on the type of project it is. If it's a very narrative-led project, that might be the copywriter. If it's a very design-led project, it might be the designer. So it just depends on the project. There's also more structured collectives. And I talked to this really interesting guy called Tyler in the US who has an agency called Optimist. And it's a digital marketing agency very much focused on the tech sector. And he's the only employed person in that business, the only person with a salary. Everyone else is part of this structured collective where they share a profit pool and they also get paid a set rate depending on the projects that they're working on. So they're like freelancers, but they're part of a collective and they've always got consistent ongoing work. So it was a really interesting way to, I guess, remove some of the problems of running an agency business, which is the chronic payroll overhead, stay awake at night issue, but still have a consistent team that can flex up and down around different projects and also be able to plug in experts for specific projects when you need them.
How fascinating. Well, you talk a lot about culture in your book as well. And I know quite a bit about your agency and some of the differences that you have, put to work there. You also, I think, talked about this in the summit. You were determined to create a culture that you wanted to work in after previously working in toxic environments. So tell us a bit about what that looks like.
That makes my previous employers sound terrible. They really weren't.
No, I hope they're not listening.
Probably not, since I don't know if you guys know this, but I used to be a retail buyer. I was, I had a whole other career that wasn't writing. Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
But, I worked in the UK, I worked in the US for big companies. And this idea of culture really started to emerge for me running a small business when I started talking to a lot of the companies I was working with about culture, because we were writing about HR issues and B Corps and things like that. And I thought, this is really interesting how valuable culture is as a tool for retention and attracting the right people and top talent. And so I really put that to work within the business, and the team really created the culture. I cannot take credit for this at all. But for us, it's about true flexibility. It's about caring and supporting each other. It's about no egos in the room. It's about never working with dickheads, because that just makes everyone's life miserable. It's about the benefits. It's about things like birthday leave. I mean, I think just giving everyone a day off for their birthday is such a lovely thing to do. It doesn't actually cost you that much, and it makes such a difference to people's happiness. Honestly, it's such a low-hanging fruit. And so for me, what I would say to anyone listening to this is, even if you're a freelancer or a company of one, you can be intentional with your workplace culture, because you are the most valuable employee in your business. Without you, there is no business. So start with what you want your business to be. What's the ideal business you'd like to work for? Because you get to decide that. And what are the values you stand for? So care and collaboration is part of our values, and that's expressed through our culture. Once you do that, even as a freelancer, if you ever do decide to take on staff, it will be so much easier to bring the right people on board, because they'll be drawn in by your culture and what you like to work with. And it will give you an advantage over some employers who may be able to offer more money, but don't really offer the level of flexibility or mental well-being support that you do.
Yeah.
So interesting. I do love the fact that, well, I often say that's the thing where I'm freelance and I'm unemployable because I won't work with dickheads anymore. So, and that is actually, people often talk about flexibility, but to me, it's about the flexibility of who I work for is one of the key things. But also, I think there is a tendency when you start freelancing and start an agency, you get back into that drive of being an employee, forgetting that you're in charge of your business and you're doing things your client wants, and you become almost like a de facto employee of your clients. So I think that's important to remember who's in charge, and that would be you.
Yeah, that's such a great insight. And there have been times in my career where I just felt like I traded one boss for 50 really demanding bosses who all wanted everything at the same time, and all thought that they were the most important person in my day. And and it is actually on us as the business owner to step back and say, they don't know that I'm already overcommitted. It's on me to tell them how I prefer to work because that's how they'll get the best out of me. And so absolutely taking back control is really important, and setting boundaries. I think I do talk about setting boundaries a lot in the book, actually, because that's a lesson hard learned. But knowing when to say no and the red flags to spot, that's a really important thing.
So important. So the big question for me is about whether you should outsource or not. Like, should you bring talent in-house or outsource? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it's whether you should outsource, but what you should outsource, because you really can't do it all. And you're not an expert in it all. I mean, everyone's probably already outsourcing something, which is probably tax or compliance in some way. What I would suggest before you decide whether they're going to be in-house or outsourced is think about all the tasks in your business that are billable and all the tasks that are non-billable, and like make a list. And so in the billable tasks, you might have things like writing and editing and proofreading and research and interviews and maybe strategy and that kind of thing, planning, content planning. And in the non-billable part, you have things like admin, project admin, like quoting and invoicing, and you have marketing, and you have financial management of some degree, bank reconciliation. And then you can decide which things you're really good at and enjoy and highlight those and keep those, and which things it would be better for your business if you paid someone else to do it. And then you can decide whether that person should be in-house or not. For example, I would suggest things like managing client relationships, I would keep in-house, because those relationships are actually part of the value of your business. And if you start outsourcing that, you will very quickly lose control of what actually drives your repeat revenue or your project revenue. But things like marketing your business, you may be able to find a really great VA that you can outsource to, or you might decide to hire a junior or an intern, even just test it with an intern and see how they go at managing your socials or designing some things in Canva for you. So you can kind of experiment a little bit before you take the leap into hiring a full-time employee or a permanent part-time employee or even a casual employee. There's lots of different options.
We talked a bit at the start about delegating and how that was a real lesson in letting go, particularly for me at Rachel's List. So how did you overcome that? Was it really easy for you, or did you find it as hard as I did?
I really feel like you should ask my team and they'll say, nope, Sarah still finds that really hard. I do like the satisfaction of getting stuff done. I actually like doing the work, and it can be really hard to let that go. But once you can't do it all, you really have to. So look, I think the key thing I've learned is you have to be really clear about what your expectations are up front. Show them what good looks like. And it's taken us a long time to actually get some processes around that, even internally, just to create a swipe file internally of our best work as a reference has saved us so much time.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. We write so many brochures for property developers. And while every property development is unique and different and has different, attributes, there are only so many ways you can describe a kitchen. And so having a swipe file of property brochures is actually a really nice reference when you get stuck. That's just one example. Plus, it shows what good looks like from a tone and structure point of view. Be really clear with them on the deadline. I often have to be really clear, whether it's freelancers or in-house team, on remembering to think outside the brief, because that's what the client's actually paying for, is actually that thinking. The thinking part is actually the value we bring. Then you let them get on with it and trust that they'll deliver. And no matter what, you give them really prompt and constructive feedback at the end so they can keep showing that they're improving if there've been any issues along the way. And look, that sounds really easy, but all that takes time. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with delegating when you're already really busy, is finding the time to do that well. But it's time well spent, because your team will get better and better and better, and they'll soon be better than you. And that's really the goal. The other challenge I've had with delegating is weaning my clients off expecting me to do it. That was more of a challenge early on. And I'm sure a lot of people listening would go, oh, but my favorite clients won't like it if someone else is doing the work. And you actually just have to be quite blunt about it and say, I'm not available, but I'm going to supervise this, or I'm going to be involved in this in some way. And, it's going to be great. And just kind of build that trust slowly over time, because once you get the trust in your whole team, it will make your life a lot easier as well. One professional services firm once shared with me that they always make sure they have two people in any meeting with a new client, because that immediately builds trust in more than one person in the team. And it creates a sense of a bigger group as well behind the scenes. And so I think that's a really great thing to remember, even though that all costs time and money, it's time well spent.
I love that.
That's interesting.
Mm.
I know running an agency often means managing staff. So,
Mm.
and is that difficult? I mean, I've been an editor and things, so I've had to manage staff, and I must admit, after 10 years of running my own show, I don't know if I'd like to do that. I like doing things the way I like it and when I like it. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's probably an extension of the delegation question, isn't it? Because I think it also comes naturally to some people. Some people are amazing managers and they get to do that as their full-time job. They're just managing others. The challenge for us is we're managing and doing. And so that's where some of the tension lies. And again, that comes down to time. For me, managing others is the best of times and the worst of times.
Yeah.
At times, it's small times. And I mean, I have no regrets with any of it, but the best of times is when you're growing a business together and it's really fun and it's super collaborative. And we often remark on how we never want to work solo again because we would miss each other's feedback and ideas on our work. And that's a really great benefit of working as part of a team. And I can see everyone adding value in ways that I could never do on my own. So that's the best of times. The worst of times can be when it can be an emotional roller coaster. And I think most people managers would reflect that COVID was really challenging for people who are leading teams because we have a duty of care, and that emotional well-being was so critical at that time. It's kind of like parenting, right? You can only ever be as happy as your unhappiest child, and sometimes managing others is a bit like that.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not reflecting on my own team or business, but I see that with a lot of managers and leaders now that I talk to when I'm interviewing people for writers' work. There's so much burnout, and it's come from that pressure of managing the emotional load of people. And so I think you have to kind of go in eyes wide open that you're taking on that as well as the benefits of running a team and having a team to support you.
Yeah, this is it's really thought-provoking hearing you talk about this, because I naturally go to Rachel's list and think, wow, I wonder what kind of manager I am. I'm very hands-off. I want them to get on with it. I don't want, I obviously will field loads of questions because I can throw things at them and then they're like, well, what do you mean by that? And how am I meant to do this part of it or whatever? But yeah, the joy for me is having a team that gets to the point where they understand almost how your brain works and what you want. And then a lot of it is just done. And you can get on with your own stuff and not have to worry, because isn't the beauty of that? That's exactly what you want. And it's really hard to get that mix. I've definitely struggled with getting the right people and the right mix who get on together and can even work collaboratively. And I've totally got it right now. And if any of them leave, I'll hunt them down. Anyway, how do you sort of stretch your capacity, like when you are growing, and still stay in control? So, how do you maintain the quality of the work you're doing when you're growing?
Yeah, and that's the bit that can quickly accelerate into chaos if you don't set things up at the start. And it really comes down to processes and systems, which sounds really boring, but I actually think we all have a little bit of system nerdery in us because we know how important it is to be efficient and effective, right? And so I'm talking about things like workflow systems so that you've got visibility over exactly what you're working on and the timelines and what's coming in the pipeline as well. You've got a regular meeting rhythm schedule if you've got a team, like having a work in progress meeting with the team and a check-in on capacity once a week is really important, just to flag any issues, particularly with deadlines coming up and things like that, because especially if you're working remotely, it's not always that visible. So having those regular check-ins is really important. As I said, we've got a lot of internal resources that we share to make things easier, like swipe files or checklists, so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time, and templates and things like that. But I actually think the most important thing that we do as a team, which is what I learned from the UK team, and probably the best thing I imported when I first started the business, was the peer review. Having a team that there's always a managing editor on your work, and that person's name also goes on the copy doc, so the client knows that it's been written by this person but edited by that person. Fresh perspective. it makes the work 10 times better before it goes to the client. And it just means we're much less likely to get a lot of rework. It saves everyone time. It makes the client trust us even more. But also as writers, we're less precious about it. We can hand it over knowing someone else will fix that headline and make it better because we know that's the problem with the piece or whatever it might be. Someone will pick up the typo. Someone will let us know if the structure's not clear or whatever. It's very reassuring. And so from a quality control point of view, if you're growing an agency of writers, I would say that is the best thing you can do and everyone learns from it. And if you have a writer in the team that isn't learning from it, they're not the right writer for you.
So interesting. Yeah, I do a bit of agency work and I always find it interesting which agencies actually look at the copy, and there's quite a few that just send it on to the client unedited, which is, I've learned not to put notes in the copy because the clients have got it. Like, can you add a link here? Is this correct? Is this the product? I'm horrified. I now sort of have different processes because otherwise the client gets my queries to the agency. And
yeah, you've got
it's
to be really
surprising.
careful with those comments. I always do it, like we still do a few bits and pieces through other agencies because there's some specialist agencies. The property sector is an example where those big campaigns, they need to be managed by an agency that just does that. So we are the strategic copywriters for those agencies. But I would always write those comments with the end client in mind because there's very little chance that the account manager's going to read it thoroughly.
Yeah, that was a lesson learned, I think. Yeah. But you talked a little bit about billable and non-billable hours, and that's one of the things I wonder. Like, there's other roles in an agency, particularly if you've got some size on you, like payroll, admin, client liaison. How do you account and, quote for them if they're not directly bringing in business?
It's kind of that this is probably the really most critical question when you're building a model around your business, because to make a sustainable business, and by that I mean one that is profitable, because there's no point in running something at a loss, that's your money, you actually need to cover those non-billable expenses, and you're paying for them somewhere, right? It's your time or it's someone else's time. And so that's why I invented the incredibly nerdy break-even model spreadsheet, which I actually share on my website that goes with the book, beyoncolo.co. So if anyone wants a nerdy spreadsheet, you can have a play with it there.
Love so nerdy spreadsheet.
It's so nerdy. I love it.
And so what you can do with that is actually plug in the true costs of your billable and non-billable expenses. So it might be staff wages, or it might be freelancers, or it might be a VA, or it might, however you're managing that, it might be your own time. And you can actually calculate quite quickly what the value per hour of your non-billable expenses are. And then you add that to your billable hourly rate. And that suddenly becomes your break-even hourly rate. Now, I'm saying this with a caveat, and that is we don't charge our clients by the hour. We have fixed project fees. But understanding our hourly rate allows us to scope a project properly and make sure that we've more than covered the time that we think it will take, or charge for value if that's the way the project is running. And so just understanding those numbers and making sure you're charging enough beneath the hood is the key to making sure this thing actually works. And where I've seen some agencies come unstuck is where they're very top heavy. And so they've got a lot of account service, non-billable staff at a partner level, at a high paying level, at a founder level. But the billable talent is the next level down, not getting paid enough, and they will leave, and suddenly you've got no business. And so I think it's a really important thing to get right. You really, until you get to a scale, you can't afford to have more than one or two people who are non-billable. That's the harsh reality of it. But you can outsource some of those things.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, we have talked a little bit about the processes that you set up. I would love to know, as a very nerdy person and also someone who has made lots of mistakes in setting up processes, was that a real trial and error thing for you, or did you very strategically say, right, this is how we work, this is, what we're going to set up,
we're constantly reinventing it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I am such a bowerbird. I'm constantly stealing and borrowing from others. I'll read someone else's terms of work and go, oh, that's really good. Yeah. We should include that. Yeah. The warning bell I'll ring on that is that the way that I do that is probably not great, because it means that I've got this sort of Frankenstein system. where things not all our stuff talks to each other perhaps as well as it could, and we're still working through that because we've got Slack over here and email over here, and some clients want us to work in Teams and some want us to work in Zoom, and so it's I'd say it's been a bit more reactive than proactive, I would think. But I think we've learned what really works well for us. And sometimes it's the simplest things. So I can't tell you how glad I am that I have a template for my copy docs and PowerPoints and things like that. Like, that saves me so much time. And it can also be a really valuable brand reminder as well. Every time you send a draft, if your brand is on it and your name is on it and it gets shared amongst the broader team for stakeholder review, then you suddenly got more awareness in that organization than you would have before. So I think little things like that are important to get right.
Yep.
So interesting. Do you think some of those process issues are more common when you're taking on bigger jobs, which you tend to do as an agency, larger scopes, larger budgets, and the process that you can really fall down on if your processes aren't robust?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we have a client relationship manager who is an absolute gun with attention to detail. And oh my God, there's some jobs we've done recently where it would have fallen over completely. I'm talking about websites with 250 pages that all had to be tracked. We're rewriting 70 articles at once for a major energy provider. So there is a spreadsheet behind that project that everyone who's working on that project can go in. They know where every article is up to, and they know exactly what stage they're at, and there's a folder system for where the finished articles go and then the approved articles. And without that system, I don't think we could do a job at that scale. It's just, you need to have that detail behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, something that listeners love to talk about on the Content Bite is lead generation. And I'm wondering how different it is from a freelance point of view compared to an agency. So how and where do you find your clients as an agency?
It's probably not the answer everyone wants to hear, because it's exactly the same. It's relationship.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And it's word of mouth, and it's organic. I mean, we do marketing, obviously, and we do find LinkedIn. Staying top of mind on LinkedIn is really important. And that's not just the company page. I mean, not that many people engage with the company page compared to engaging with the individuals. And I think that's important to remember. You need to do both, and perhaps pay more attention to your personal page too. We send out bi-monthly newsletters, and we have blogs, and we have gated content and things like that. And those things work to keep us top of mind and make us easier to refer, because if someone gets a great newsletter from us and thinks, oh, so-and-so, in the sustainability team actually needs help with the ESG report, maybe these guys can help. I'll flick this to them. So that's all useful as well. So we get a lot of cross referrals within organizations. When I was first starting out and growing the business, I mean, I'm very fortunate, I guess, but some of my best clients came from conversations in the school playground and, conversations with my uni friends. And I know that's probably a bit of luck as to who was in my circle, but I think being open to those ideas and being someone that other people trust to help, it goes a long way. I mean, we ended up working with GE Capital, which is a major global company, but for many, many years as a result of one school playground conversation. And it took I've only ever made one cold call in my life when I was first starting out. And that was to Australia Post in New South Wales, because I'd done a little bit of work with the UK team on Royal Mail, and I actually nerdily really love the post office, and I thought it would be really fun to work for Australia Post, iconic Australian brand, and they were really great. That one cold call ended up being about a 12-year relationship and one of the biggest clients that we ever had. But he was really lovely on the other end of the phone, and they needed help with their direct mail, and then it blew out from there. And I learned a lot from working with them. But me personally, I don't think cold calls work, and no one wants to receive them. And so a warm introduction is a much better thing. Actually, the other thing that I would recommend, I'm a big believer in real life events. And I think we've kind of got out of the habit a bit of those with COVID, but I'm seeing a lot more people going to them now. Industry events are great. If you can attend one industry event a year even, and you'll learn something about your industry. It might be the industry you specialize in writing in. If you're a healthcare writer, go to a healthcare industry. And you might be the only copywriter there, and have conversations with people in the coffee queues. And just, even if you don't, it can be a long game. Even if you don't end up with jobs out of it, you'll end up with some new contacts, and you'll also learn something that you can apply back in your business. So I think that's a really good strategy as well.
I love that tip. It's true.
Yeah, no, I do. I think this year is the the last year I started going to more in-person
Yeah,
events.
me
And
too.
that's what the summit taught me. And I think it's really valuable. And I just like it. Connecting. I think it's
Yeah.
that being on understanding what's happening in the industry, even if it doesn't bring you direct clients, it just makes you more aware of some of the issues out there, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the best audience research you can do. So the one I like to go to is the B2B Marketing Leaders Summit, because a lot of our work is B2B. I feel very lucky that they let me in the room, because agencies are actually not allowed. But I started going as a writer, really, and to learn about that. And I sit in a room full of CMOs, and I get to find out what their challenges are with their budgets, where they're spending money, how they're managing the content funnel. I can speak their language because I've learned it all at the event. And I've actually ended up with a few really amazing global clients as a result of just being in the room. And I think there's something to be said for being in the room. So,
So
yeah,
interesting.
definitely do that.
Is there anything you wish you were told about running an agency when you're starting out? I mean, that's what the book's about, really, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's true. If I was talking to myself like 18
Yeah.
years ago, I'd say, keep going. It'll be bigger than you ever imagined. I
Yeah.
never thought that I'd actually run a business that would generate this kind of revenue or employ this many people. I never started with that in mind. I just wanted something flexible around the kids, like most of us, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. So I definitely think it's important to remember that. But also, as we said earlier, to remember that you're always in control. So if you ever feel like you're working all hours for the business rather than the business working for you, that's when you need to step back and think, okay, do I need to set some boundaries? What can I scale back? What should I say no to so that I can actually say yes to the things I want to do? And it's a bit like knowing that you don't have to do it all. I think that's the thing when you first start growing, is you feel like you want to say yes to everything because you may never work again. We always feel that, but you don't have to. And actually, when you say yes to everything, you're actually saying no to a whole lot of things that could come your way tomorrow that you won't have time for anymore. The other thing I wish I'd known a bit more about was how to manage people and how to make decisions well around people. I think I find it quite hard to have really candid conversations when performance is a bit of an issue. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for me personally, because I want everyone to feel like they're, doing good work and getting better and things like that. But sometimes you do have to pull the pin, and that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And so perhaps I wish I'd known that it's okay to make those decisions, because actually you're making the right choice for the rest of the team or for the business or for your clients. And so that's the most important thing you can do. It's actually not about you.
Yes.
So that's probably what I wish I'd known a bit more about.
Wow, we could talk to you all day, but before we go, we need to ask you the question we ask all our guests: their favorite tech tips or tools they'd be lost without. Do you have any?
Yes, actually, I think it's one that you and I both love, Rachel, and that's Fathom.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an AI meeting recording tool. We have depended on AI for a couple of years now to do our transcription, and I can't imagine life without AI transcribing. I do remember a time where we used to send audio files to someone in Perth and it would come back 3 days later. And I'm so grateful that we can now get it back in 3 minutes, because it does make the deadlines a lot easier.
All attest to that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love Fathom too. I use it as well.
Yeah. And I actually do pay for it now, because I think that the free version isn't as good on the meeting summaries. And it's actually the meeting summaries that are the gold with Fathom. You can actually immediately turn those into a reverse brief for a client. Or if you're having a meeting with an accountant or something like that, and you've got all these action items, it's really clear who's doing what, and you don't have to go back to pages of notes and things like that. So I think it summarizes meetings and the key points really well from an interview as well. And you can interrogate it and say, what did Bob say about, the scale of the building or something like that? and it'll go straight to that point for you. So it's like having a little another brain who's willing to do all the hard reading, especially if you've done a 1 hour call and you've got this, 30 pages of transcript. So it's a really great tool for research and for managing client meetings. So it does both.
Amazing.
That's good. Actually, it's interesting with Fathom is I've used it for a lot of my clients, and every time I use it, they've emailed back and said, "Oh my God, this is gold. I'm going to implement this too."
Yeah.
That's how good it is.
Yeah, I haven't met one because that's the other thing. You can share that recording immediately with your client, and they've got their actions too.
Yeah.
They can't ignore the fact that they promised to get you X, Y, and Z, so you
Yeah.
can keep going with the project. It's there.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I think I have to upgrade to the paid one.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
I
Worth
did.
it.
Yeah, I'll do
Yeah.
that.
The transcription's better too.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for this chat, Sarah. It's so good. So tell us about where you can find about Writers Australia, but also you did mention you've got a great website
Yeah.
for the book.
For the book as well.
And
yeah,
that
sure.
spreadsheet sounds gold. So tell our listeners where you can find out about them.
I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. So come and stalk me on LinkedIn and connect with me at Sara Howard, Sarah without an H, at Writers. You'll find me on LinkedIn. You can find out more about Writers at writers.net.au. And if you're interested in freelancing with us, there is a form you can fill out there with some details and we'll get in touch with you. We don't have a lot of freelancers on our pool at the moment, but we are looking at that. So I'm just, promoting that while I'm here.
Yeah.
The book, the book is called Beyond Solo. So if you go to beyondsolo.co, you can sign up for VIP access to a few events that are coming up and also get some tools, including the spreadsheet. And you can follow me on Instagram at Sara Howard_writes. So I'd love to see you there too. But thank you so much, guys, for having me. This has been fun.
This has been really
great.
fun. Really appreciate having you, Sarah. Thanks for everybody who's listening. And we will pop all that in the show notes. And we'll see you next week.
Yep, for sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors, Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software that helps freelancers run their business with confidence.
And don't forget, if you're a gold member of Rachel's list, you can check your welcome emails for an exclusive discount code on the annual subscription rate. You can also find it in the private Facebook Gold group or just contact us at hello@rachelslist.com.au.